Hey, guess what? The .NET Developer Days Conference is happening October 18th and 19th in Warsaw, with some great speakers and over 30 technical sessions spread over 2 days. Among them are keynotes by Scott Hunter and James Montemagno. If you can't make it to Warsaw in person, they also offer a great online option. For only €150, you can access 2 days of live-streamed conference sessions, as well as all the session recordings after the show. Check them out at developerdays.pl and take 20% off your online registration with the code ROCKS. That's ROCKS exclamation point. Welcome back to .NET Rocks. It's Carl Franklin here.
This is Richard Campbell.
And we're in the terrarium at NDC Oslo.
And let's face it, we like it here.
We do like it here.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we're not on the floor.
No, which is weird.
It is weird. We're sort of like right in the main, I don't know what you call this, a foyer. It's not really a lobby.
It's like the main hallway that wraps around the whole facility.
Right. So when you go to a ball game and you go up in the stands, you have the
halls, right?
The halls that go around, and usually there's concessions and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, at NDC, the concessions are on the floor. So we're basically looking at the exit.
Yeah. For better or worse.
For better
I'll tell you, though,
worse.
It's a sold-out show. I don't know that we'd want to be on the floor. Like, it is a zoo down there.
It is really crazy.
There's a lot of people. It's a little easier to move around up here.
So you're going to hear some clinks and clanks in the background. That's just par for the course. People coming and going.
There's one utility door right beside us. So if you hear the big whoom, that's the door.
Like last week, right?
That's it.
That was how we both looked over.
That was a sound.
The heck was that? All right. Well, let's roll the crazy music for Better Know a Framework.
Awesome. All right, man, what do you got?
Well, I hate to keep tooting my own horn, but my content is pretty damn good these days.
Is it?
Yeah, this one is Blazor Train.
Oh, yeah.
So as you know, I've been doing this series on MSAL, Microsoft Authentication Library, in Maui. Well, we figured out how to do it in Blazor Server, too.
Nice.
So the Blazor Train episode 89 is how to do auth with MSAL against Google and Twitter and Microsoft. I think it's just Microsoft, but once you do one identity provider, it's easy to do others. And that's in Blazor Server, and we're going to continue on doing it with Blazor WASM and every other permutation of Blazor we can figure out. So that's blazortrain.com, episode 89. Know it, learn it, love it. Richard, who's talking to us today?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1737, the one we did with Simon Kropp back in 2021, talking about Verify.
Yeah.
And the snapshot testing,
That's right.
which you really liked. You were pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I am excited about it.
And Rustlin has this great comment, admittedly a year ago, where he said, hey, another great show and a really interesting approach to testing using Verify. All types of testing, whether it's unit testing, automation, so forth, has a huge problem in our industry. We either don't write them or we write them so badly that it's more time consuming to keep them up to date than the actual code. I've been interviewing more than 100 developers in the past year alone, and one of my questions is what approach or patterns they take to writing unit tests. The usual answer I would like to hear is the same approach as when I write code for the application, that I use any patterns that are required for testing a particular functionality, or at least to mention the usage of a mother object or builder pattern. Yeah. I don't even care about naming. I just want to hear that they create some plan in multiple places that will be able to extract the results as needed. Most of the time, developers don't even understand what I'm asking or answer using assert, act, assert.
What?
Well, I guess it's a strategy.
Okay.
The most unmaintainable tests are, of course, UI automation tests.
Right.
The worst. And on this side, PageObject helps extract those tests, and Playwright.dev has the PageObject model feature.
If only we knew somebody who knew anything about Playwright.
About that. This may have been a setup. And of course, it's great to go to NDC and other conferences. This really is in the comment, because we're at NDC right now, to help you get informed about new texts and different approaches. And you have to decide what works, it doesn't work for you. Thanks for all the good inspiration and ideas.
Nice.
You're welcome, Russell. And thank you so much for your comment. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on Facebook. We publish every show there. And if you comment on the show and I read it, we'll send you a copy of music to go by.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Send us a tweet. No Swedish jokes, because we're in Norway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll still be funny.
It'll still be funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's introduce Debbie. Debbie O'Brien is the Senior Program Manager at Microsoft with over 10 years of experience in front-end development. She's worked as a tech lead and consultant for many important clients with various technologies and often with a strong focus on performance. She has led teams both in-house and remotely, as well as given workshops and training. Debbie has many years of experience as a mentor for online learning platforms, Treehouse, and Open Classrooms. Debbie's a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in Developer Technologies, a Google Developer Expert in Web Technologies, and Cloudinary Media Development Expert. Cloudinary. Wow, you're going to have to tell us about that. Also, Auth0 Ambassador and Nuxt, N-U-X-T Ambassador. Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you really? I don't think you're allowed to be an MVP.
I know. I need to update that because now I'm like a former MVP.
That's right. You can't be an MVP.
The same way to GitHub Star. It's like a GitHub Star alumni. So now it's all changed.
There you go. Yeah. You're in a different state now.
So Cloudinary. What's Cloudinary? It's an awesome name.
Yeah. So it's really cool. It's about like putting your images in the cloud.
Okay.
Right. So what I do is I put all my images into Cloudinary. Mm-hmm. And now when I write my code, I have this kind of little thing that say, you know what, Cloudinary, I want like you to be auto when it comes to the, size of the image, the amount of weight that image should download and what type of image it is. So I might, upload a JPEG, but it'll come down as a better, sourced image, right? So it will choose depending on the browser.
PNG
or even better than that, the WebP or whatever is the latest and greatest that browser supports, and it's clever enough to be able to choose that.
So you don't have to decide. You just put your assets up in Cloudinary,
exactly,
and it'll pull the optimal one for the browser at the moment.
Exactly, and it can do so much more powerful stuff because you can even just like turn it into a circle. By just putting some sort of little things in the URL. So just in the URL, you just put in this and it will automatically do all this, add some text if you want. So it's really cool. And it means I never have to like worry about my images being too heavy or being, causing performance problems because I'm using Cloudinary.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
So let's talk. You heard the open, the listener that obviously quoted Playwright to us.
Which is very cool.
Yeah. I know. And I've been on the search for someone great to talk about Playwright and I found you.
Woohoo.
Because it clearly looks like sort of next generation thinking on web testing again. We keep trying.
Yeah, I think the problem is that in testing in general, there hasn't been a lot of work done.
Yeah.
People just put it as an afterthought. It's like, oh, we have to test. So even like the testing frameworks of the past also were kind of like thinking that was an afterthought. I don't know. They didn't put a lot of love in it, right? And we've all used Selenium and we know we felt the pain, right?
Yes.
And Playwright's aim is to make testing fun and easy, approachable, so that anybody can test, right? Because before it was only QA engineers, right? Yeah. Now it's developers who are testing.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't even be the senior developer, the tech lead. And I had to bring testing into every company that I worked on.
Yeah.
And every company was like, number one, we're not qualified to test.
Right.
We don't know how to write good tests.
Yeah.
Number two, we don't know how to use any testing frameworks. Number three, we don't have time. Number four, we don't have the money and time to invest in people's education to teach them testing. So there's a whole big barrier, right?
I don't have time to do it right, but I can always have time to do it over.
Well, and always have time to fix the bugs later, right?
Yeah.
And we had a whole bug fixing team. Like literally their job was just fixing bugs. And it was insane, the amount of bugs. And I have a whole talk actually on previous bugs that we had to solve.
But the idea that somebody that didn't write the bug has to fix the bug bothers me.
Yeah.
Like you wrote it, you fixed it.
You're creating animosity, aren't you?
They might not even be there in the company at the time. Do you know what I mean? And developers change. And
And that's always been my strategy getting into, like when I had to tackle code I didn't know, I started with a testing framework and working through the tests on that was a way to learn the code. And as I started making changes to it, helped me catch that I was breaking it because you don't understand the dependencies that exist in it.
Yeah.
So what I know about Playwright is that it will actually run the web app, right? Doesn't it load it up, run it, and go through with all the inputs that you specify to get it to a certain state and then see if you get the right result?
Yeah, so you can run it in headed or headless mode.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if you're a Visual Studio Code user, you can actually just run it straight from the extension. And it'll actually just open the browser for you.
Nice.
And then as you're writing the test, you press play, you run that test, and you can visually see it.
Yeah.
You might not want to visually see it because you might just be so, I know my code.
Yeah.
But I kind of like
Right.
to see it and just make sure it really is doing what I'm doing, especially when the test passes. I'm like, did that really pass? Did that really do that? Or is it just green?
Right.
Why, Ms. O'Brien, how cynical of you. The test passed? That can't be
I
right.
know, right? I almost prefer it when it fails because then I know I can fix it.
That's what you expect, right? As
Yeah.
I wrote code, something's going to break.
Yeah.
Like, that's
How
life.
come I did it right?
Yeah. But I can imagine when you get into automation and so forth, like you want more headless stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But when I'm first writing out a set of tests and so forth, I think the headed mode is really cool that you watch it go and it's like,
Yeah.
am I doing the right thing?
It makes it easier because you can kind of see what you're missing as well. You're like, oh, I didn't test that
Yeah,
functionality.
that piece
but it's
just
also
went
really
by.
fast. So
Yeah, you have
sometimes
to
you're
be
like,
paying attention.
yeah.
Can you actually slow it down? Like, run
Yeah,
one test per second kind of thing?
I mean, you could if you wanted to, but then do you really?
Well, not ultimately, but when I'm first watching it and saying like, what did I miss on this page?
So I would do it differently, and I would like go straight to the trace viewer. So if you're kind of like really want to, you're convinced that your test is good and you finished it.
Yeah.
I actually love the trace viewer, which is meant to be like for post-mortem debugging. So on CI, something failed and you don't know what failed.
Right.
You can download the trace, and the trace opens as a PWA, and you have your whole trace of the test.
Wow.
And you can go through the whole timeline. So you can hover along and you can see every single stage of the test, every click action, every expect or whatever. You can see every single action. You can click on each one. You can see the action, the before and the after the page, what changed, what happened. So in your own time, you can just click away
so
and
just
inspect
run the
it.
test through fast and then go to the trace
Yeah.
and walk through it.
And walk through it.
Yeah.
And even better, if there is an error, it's really easy to fix that, find that bug because you have this whole, like the website is there in the middle.
You're in the page at the moment.
You're
with
in the
data
page
set.
and not
Yeah.
just like seeing a snapshot image of the page. You're seeing a DOM snapshot
Yeah.
of the page, which means you can open the developer tools and you can actually
Hit
inspect it.
F12, yeah.
And you can see the CSS class that's missing, that's not there.
Right,
And you can
right.
see, this failed because somebody on mobile deleted that class and therefore it's not working. It's invisible. And you can actually go and inspect that and see.
That seems very very specific case you've described, Deb. I can't imagine that ever happened to you.
Yeah, some developers hid something on mobile view because
Yeah,
it made sense.
I know how to make mobile faster. Delete
Yeah.
all this stuff. Nobody needs that.
Yeah.
But
Details.
the big one for me is that you validate all the fields like that. It's super easy to miss that sort of stuff. So it's great to be able to go back through.
And the great thing about the trace viewer is you also have the code right there inside it. So
Yeah.
I could give that trace to you and you don't even have the code, my code of the test, but you can actually now see the test code and you could actually help debug it and say, oh, I can see in your code you have this test, this is wrong. So
Right.
you have access to everything and it's a zip file. So you can just like zip it to someone, they can open it up
Easy to move around.
as a PWA and check it out. So it makes it really easy for, I think it helps QA engineers be able to send it to the front end developers, for example, and say,
Yeah.
right, this test is broken. Go fix it. And
I wrote this. I can't figure out how to fix it. I'm not sure what I did wrong here. Push it to a senior dev.
Yes.
It's just a super easy way to share the problem rather than to provide recreate instructions.
Yes. Yes. And speaking of debugging and stuff, one of Playwright's features is test isolation.
Yeah.
So everything is like purely isolated, which means no test interferes with another test. A whole new browser context opens up every time we test. So that means if you have any like network caching or anything that going on in one test, it just never gets interfered in the other one. So when you debug that test, you are only debugging what happened in that test.
Right.
And you never have to think about, and that saves on flakiness, saves on other problems that you sometimes have had in other frameworks.
And this isn't hot reload or anything. Like you're not making a fix and then seeing the test update. You do have to go rerun it after the fact.
Yeah, when you open the trace viewer, that's not an editable source.
You're not in editable space.
No,
there.
that's like normally what you would do with that after CI. I do it when I'm in general debugging because I like it, but also we have live debugging in VS Code and stuff.
Right.
So you can debug or the usual debugging tools that you're normally using.
Yeah.
And then that's when what you would normally debug.
Yeah, I'd do this on a local run for sure,
Yes.
and run the tests through just because
Exactly.
the PWA is going to be such a good way to look at what happened.
It's a great way to see like, okay, I have a full on test. I want to just inspect it. I want to make sure I covered everything. Sometimes that's even good
Yeah.
because one of the great things as well is you can test across multiple domains. So if you're testing, I was testing one website that has a payment system, but the payment system goes to another site and I want to make sure you can buy those tickets. Now it's on a different domain.
Right.
And I need to test that whole process from end to end over 2 domains and Playwright can do that. So then in the trace viewer, you can go from that one website down into the other website and kind of see what's going on at both times and see that everything's working as it should.
Yeah, it also probably help me figure out cross-type scripting problems too, then.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually faking it all on your own local machine. You're calling across to the correct domain, so you'll know where you're actually at.
Yeah.
And how do we kind of jumped in
Yeah.
on this, right? Like just straight to the fire.
I went straight to the end.
Yeah. So how do you build a test using Playwright?
So there are a few ways. You can literally just start writing code,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am a big fan of the test generator because
Okay.
I just like things that make my life easier.
Yeah, of course.
So the generator is literally like, it's called CodeGen and it opens up a browser profile. So you
Right.
can do this through the terminal. And it will open up 2 windows. You can do it through VS Code where it actually opens the test file in VS Code itself. And you've got already the test file created. And then you start clicking on the browser. So we're testing, I don't know, the .NET Rocks website. And
Right.
we want to
Goodness knows it needs it.
Yeah, it does.
we'll do it later. And we can literally start clicking around and making sure those podcasts, you can press play, you can save till
Yeah,
later.
but
You
that's what
can
it's
do
supposed to.
everything that it should expect it to do.
Yeah.
You can make sure your image has alt tags, for example. So we can test all that kind of stuff by just clicking. As you're clicking around, it's going to record those clicks.
Right.
So now we have a test written that is able to press play and the test works. And we could go home and say, hey, well, we've written a test and it works. Now we could improve that test and say, right, all the clicks work, but really I also want to test that the H1 is there
Right.
and that it has the correct text. And that's not something the user would click.
No.
So I could click it. The generator will generate that as a click. And I'm like, that you're not a click.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
really a click. It's not
So
a thing.
exactly. So you
But-
change that to an assertion
Yeah,
and expect it to be
that's
visible.
an assert.
Exactly.
This is in the H1.
Exactly. We don't have assertions for the generator yet, but it's something that is in the pipeline because that would be like super cool. Because my idea is also that to help teach people through the generator, as in if the generator will generate good tests, then people will understand how to test good at the start and then they will just
Right.
write better tests.
That's a great point. Use the generator because it'll lead you towards a great testing strategy too.
Exactly.
Like
At least for getting
resilient change.
started.
Well, and that's the biggest problem. And I think is exactly what Ruslan said is like, I've made a bunch of tests. Then we made V2 of the app, V2 of the site. And now all those tests are garbage. I have to
Yeah.
start over.
Yeah. And starting over is painful.
No,
Nobody wants to do it.
I've had a project where we redid the entire test infrastructure 3 times. And by the
Yeah.
3rd time, we hated everybody and everything, right? Like you're in a sad place at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know tests are going to break when we make major changes. It's just how much can I salvage?
Yeah.
And part of that is just building tests in a way where they don't have dependencies on things that are important, really.
Yeah.
And they really have the right assets. But what does Playwright really do to decrease the likelihood of flaky tests?
I think test isolation helps
The main
completely
thing,
with flakiness because it's, like I said, it's not running into the other tests. And it auto waits on everything. So it's like, it's going to wait until that button is ready to be clicked,
Right,
until that
right.
JavaScript is loaded, until
It's not
you
going
know.
to say
So
div
it's
doesn't
well behaved.
exist.
Yes. Now it will also fail if for the right reasons. And I tested a website recently where the mobile menu was failing and I couldn't figure out. I was like, this is not working. And I set another timeout because Playwright, I think it's a couple of seconds I think it's 3 seconds or 5, I'm not sure.
By default.
But we could change it to 10 seconds if you wanted to. But should you? So we literally changed it in 10
Compensating
seconds.
for a site that's already bad. Yeah.
Exactly. But then when we actually did the website and checked it on 3G, I couldn't click the menu. I was clicking it. I was like, you're not opening. And 5-6 seconds later, it opened. And I'm like, okay, so there's something going on in the JavaScript here.
Yeah.
So the
got to do a
test-
tailspin.
Yeah, the test picked that up, which meant then now you can go and fix that issue. Or you could make your test slower and the test will pass. But have you really,
Yeah.
you know.
You're covering one problem with another problem.
Exactly.
right?
But it does wait for the time that it should take for that menu to be able to be clickable. And if it's taking longer than that, then you have a problem in your code that you should
go after.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're reminding me of all the times you're on a page that's partially rendered, but you don't know it's partially rendered. You go to click on a thing, and then a new renderer comes in and moves it, so you click on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that wrong thing always tends to be an ad. So you're like, this isn't by accident, is it?
Yeah.
This seems intentional. You just made money off of a bad render approach. Yeah. So I love the code gen approach. I love that you can walk through those pieces, and then you've got a chunk of code. I mean, what is it writing in?
What is it writing in?
Yeah, what's the test written in?
Well, it depends on what you choose to start with.
I have choices.
You have, of course, you have choices. In this world, you always have choices. So I'm going to be very honest with you. I know we're on .NET Rocks.
Yes.
I'm a JavaScript developer.
That's allowed.
So I will write my tests using the just Playwright test runner, right? TypeScript, JavaScript kind of side.
Yeah.
Now I can actually use the terminal instead of VS Code to open it up, right? So if I open with the terminal, I get the inspector, and now I can start generating my code, and then I can generate it, understand it, and then I can just say, you know what, I want this in .NET because my team is working in .NET, and I want to send this file to them and say, here's the test I've written. So I'll just literally click on .NET. It will transform all that code into .NET, and I'll send it to you, Richard, and you'll put it on the .NET Rocks website, and now your test is in .NET.
Okay.
That's how I would do a .NET.
And typically C#, I presume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now the .NET people will just actually run everything in C#, and they will never see JavaScript because that's what they do, right? And
they don't need to know. I mean, most .NET devs I know live with a certain amount of JavaScript or work all the time in JavaScript. Like that's just reality.
They're beginning to love it.
Yeah, and wrap with some with some TypeScript makes your life a little easier.
Yeah,
you know.
But it's your choice. You can write your tests in C#, or you can write your tests in TypeScript, or you can write your tests in Java, or you can write your tests in Python.
And the code gen is one way. If I modify those tests by hand, the code gen's going to write over that if I rerun the code gen.
If you start code gen again, it will create a new file.
You create a new file, yeah. Okay, so there's no reentrancy for customization stuff.
No, because once you've done it, you then copy it and put it into your editor.
Right.
And now you're gonna, if you want to generate it again, yeah, exactly.
No, that makes sense. And it gets crazy to try and do anything else, really.
Yeah, I mean,
keep it living.
You need to do some work. You can't have the generator do everything.
What?
You know?
Last week's show was all about AI doing everything for me, right?
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But
comment, write my tests. Thanks very much.
So as Richard said in the beginning of the show, I have experience with Simon Kropp's Verify, which I think uses Playwright. So, but he does snapshot testing. Mm-hmm. So, and what's the difference between something like Verify and Playwright?
I don't know what Verify is.
Okay, so I'll tell you. Verify will take will run a test and take a snapshot of the result, and then run it whenever it runs another test. It verifies it against that first result, and you can either it'll either tell you that that's exactly the same, or something has changed, and you have the option to say, okay, well, I know what that change is. That's just because of data or whatever. And you can scrub dates
that came
or whatever.
up or something.
Yeah, and you can scrub data. You can say, ignore this date or this ad or whatever.
Yeah, so we have that as well. And it's just, expect to have snapshot, to have screenshot, sorry.
Okay.
So, yeah, visual regression testing. I think we need to do more work in that scene, definitely. And we need to improve it for sure. Because we're definitely seeing a lot of people using Playwright for visual regression testing. So, it's big.
Yeah, it is a logical thing to do. Is there much difference browser to browser test-wise?
So Playwright tests across all browsers.
Right.
So automatically it's going to do that for you. And you can then choose, I only want to test on Safari for whatever reason.
This is not the 90s anymore, man.
Yeah.
These browsers have come a long way, haven't they?
They are getting better, but Safari is still lagging behind a little
Except
bit.
for Safari,
yeah, it's still getting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you can also test on mobile. So it will emulate the mobile devices for you, so you can test on iPhone, Pixel,
Safari and Chrome ultimately, really. I mean, that's but it's the mobile editions of that with those own constraints. But I'm always worried about you've run all these great tests, but it's really only was run against the Chromium engine and nothing else. And so there is variation between the browsers, and you don't necessarily pick that up.
Well, no, this is running on the WebKit as well,
so
and running on Firefox as 3 separate,
So WebKit, Gecko, Chromium.
Yep.
And at least then you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it means if something goes wrong in Safari, you're going to see it.
Yeah. When something goes wrong in Safari.
Nothing wrong with Safari.
Safari's fine. We're all fine. The ghost of Steve Jobs compels you. What about the security issues around if you got login sites that you need to log into? Like, what do you do for your tests?
Yeah, login is a big thing. Auth is a thing a lot of people have questions on. And I don't have the right answer to all those questions.
It's a struggle.
Because I need to like seriously dive deep into it, because I think like you can log in and you can mock kind of stuff, but you need to like log in properly to something. The problem then is two-factor on your mobile phone, and how do we
automate that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of issues that
I mean, generally when I've been doing testing on web stuff, internal accounts don't have to have two-factor auth, but so you're only testing on that particular account. It's just that then when you start playing with privilege models and things like that, like you want to test on other accounts. And it can be complicated. So it really depends on what you want to test. And again, I haven't dived deep enough into that, but it's kind of like a lot of people are asking me about it, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to have to like create something and test it. But then like you need, there's so many use cases, right? Yeah.
And there's logging in GitHub, there's logging in with Microsoft, there's logging in with Google. Some of them will work very easily out of the box and they will test it very easily. And some of them are more difficult.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're dealing with like an AAD authentication pop-up that's totally separate from your actual app. It's like, well, what's a test platform going to do with that?
You don't want to write your test and then like just put in your username and password and you don't have it in the test, right?
Yeah, I can't even check that in anymore, right? Like the GitHub yells at me when I do that. So yeah, it is an interesting area of, authenticated tests and what those look like. So no simple solutions there. We made it hard for a reason.
Well, there is a whole documentation on it, so I would say check it out. And then if it doesn't work on your use case, I would say create an issue and we'll kind of look into it.
Get you guys to work through it. So you're actually working on the Playwright team.
Yeah. So like I'm in Microsoft, I'm on the developer division team, but I pretty much, my job is to advocate for Playwright. So I'll spend like 20 hours a week working with Playwright teams side by side.
Right.
Mainly in advocating and helping them create better content, better documentation, speaking at conferences, workshops, videos, anything I can do, any kind of issues that come through documentation wise that people have said, hey, you haven't documented this, then let's fix it. Let's figure out.
Explain it better.
Exactly. So yeah. So I work very close with them, which also means I'm in the daily meetings, which means I hear about everything that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm part of the kind of decisions going forward sometimes. And I have a say in like, hey, let's do this, which is nice.
So you're explaining Playwright out to us, but then you're also taking feedback from us and carrying it back to the team.
Exactly.
So, although you also have that conflict of about features that aren't available to us yet.
Yes, I know what they're doing, and it's like, but it's not secret because it's open source,
right?
So there's nothing to kind of hide in that sense. It's like I can tell you, you can see the pull request.
Yeah, look, the PRs are there.
Yeah, we're working on better Docker integration, for example. You can see that, but it's not ready yet, so it's not in the, it's not there.
Yeah,
but there's so much that we need to improve.
Do they actually allow you? Can you pull a build from GitHub? And do you try some of the new bits, or do you have to? There's sort of the finished product build as well.
Yeah, no, there's like the next build, I think, as well. Just like go to the branch. But yeah, you kind of don't need to. And we release like very quickly. Like every month there's a new release.
Wow.
And then there's like the smaller kind of fixes if any bugs happened in that release.
Yeah, the 0.0 ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But every single month, we're releasing something new. Sometimes there's not much excitement, right? Because it's like, there's only a small kind of feature, and sometimes like, wow, look what we did. This is incredible. And you're like,
I'm looking at the GitHub repository. There were check-ins an hour ago. So
they're always
somebody's working on something.
Always working. That's the great thing about having teams over multiple time zones, right?
Right. But also the fact that you can get it, you can put in an issue and you could see it as a feature in a relatively small amount of time, which is pretty powerful, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Especially if your issues are upvoted, then, the team will definitely take it into consideration, start looking through it. And it's very community driven, which is nice.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And there's no other mechanism here. It put out an issue, and if people upvote that issue, there you are. That's where you guys get your things from.
Yeah. That's our roadmap.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think we should interrupt for one moment for this very important message.
Yep.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
Today's sponsor is Raygun, and we've had the good fortune to have JD Trask on the line with us today.
Imagine that. Hey, JD.
Howdy, guys.
I'm going to put on my enterprise hat today, JD, and ask you a bit about why folks should be logging. Like, what's important about logging a website or an app service?
Well, the first thing is actually to have the data to understand the extent of any issues. So an extremely common thing we see, particularly from mature sort of customers with later stage products, is that they think there can't be that many issues because I haven't heard much from my customers about them. And what we've found is that typically less than 1% of users will ever actively tell you there's a problem. And so a common scenario is you start doing this and you go, oh my goodness, the whole house is on fire. I didn't even know.
And nobody was telling you.
Yeah. And that, honestly, in my view, that is the beginning of getting value out of tools like Raygun. It's just at least understand the facts of where you are so then you can improve over time.
Yeah. Gee, our traffic is really low. I wonder why. It's amazing that they don't come back and tell you that they didn't have a good experience. They just go away.
Well, that's right. I mean, we have so much choice today in the world. It is so easy to jump away. I remember reading an e-commerce book in the late 90s, and obviously I didn't pay enough attention or I would be the founder of Amazon. But the point was, everything is just one click away. You don't even have to walk to the next shop, right? You can just do a search. There's the answer. There's the alternative. We have to compete on quality.
Yeah, my screen's big enough. I'm already searching on the other site while your site's still running.
That's right.
Well, thanks for making Raygun. We use it at .NET Rocks. And if you want more information on Raygun, just go to raygun.com and check it out.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Cabell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey.
Talking to Debbie O'Brien, who's part of Playwright and this open source tool for doing testing in a very coherent way, I think. It looks pretty cool.
Fun. We're making testing fun and easy.
Fun and easy.
Yeah.
Well, starting with code gen, then customization of your own code. Then what is it like to push it into a pipeline? Does this ultimately go back to GitHub Actions?
Yes, so it will install the GitHub Actions for you. So you don't even have to do anything.
That's what I want to know because I'm still struggling with GitHub Actions. So
I know when I was writing the docs for it and I was like, well, how does it work? And they're like, it just works. I'm like, I don't get that. It just works. What do you mean it just works? And they're like, it just works. Just put your code on GitHub, create a pull request, and it will just run the test. I'm like, it can't be that easy. Yeah. Like, it is. I'm like, how am I meant to document that?
It ends with no really. It's that easy.
Yeah.
I know you're worried. It's just like when all my tests passed, I didn't believe they ran.
Exactly.
It's
and you can also set up a server in the config file. So say you wanted to run it on a local server or whatever you're doing, it's so easy. It's all built in. So you just put in, I need you to launch this command, run on localhost 3000 or whatever, and then run the test on that local host, and it will do that.
And how do I push the results of those tests back to the right places?
So in GitHub, you'll have... Now, this is maybe a little bit different for .NET because I don't think you have HTML reporters yet. I know it's possibly in the pipeline. A lot of people have asked for it. But in my world, in the JavaScript world, we have HTML reporters. So we'll have a whole report of what went on in our test, what tests passed, were flaky, etc. And then from that report, we got our trace, and we're able to then just click on the button, and then your trace is there if the test failed. And then we can go through the trace and kind of see where the test went wrong.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about a bunch of folks working on a project simultaneously, but they've got all their own test code generated or customized by them. So their push is going to go into the pipeline and it's going to come back to them via the reporter to say, here's where we had the issues.
It's all on GitHub. So you just from GitHub, you can see everything.
Just go to GitHub and you'll get it.
Yeah.
If it isn't actually fully integrated into Studio yet.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you ready to start writing code? Is that what you get the itch?
No. What time is it on GitHub yet?
Yeah.
Is it part of Visual Studio yet? That's what I meant.
Well, that was always, when we were doing the big testing infrastructure at Strange Loop, it's the one I was talking about where we wrote it 3 times. Mm-hmm. We got really big on the amount of time it takes from push to getting the results back. And we settled on 15 minutes because it was enough time for you to get up, get a coffee, and get back, but not enough time to start on something else.
Yeah.
Because at least everything was still in your head. So when the test results spit back at you like that, with this problem, that problem, like every hour that went on, it was several more hours to fix it. And so, once upon, the original, we got the test suite to the point where it ran over a weekend.
Oh gosh.
And that was the thing, right? You did all your pushes. We're not going to run this till Saturday. And then on Monday, you're like, well, I don't know. Like, what's this about? And so then there was this initiative to shard out the tests into blocks, run simultaneous runs, and get it down to this very short interval so that it was, you would just run on demand. and be quick and responsive. I don't know what we can do in Playwright to be that clever.
So Playwright is out of the box, test run in parallel.
Okay.
So out of the box, it's much
faster. So no
faster.
serial execution anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're literally it doesn't matter the order of tests. They're just all running in parallel, even in the same test file. So everything is much faster, but then you can also add more workers and you could shard test if you wanted to. So depending on if you have hundreds of tests, thousands of tests, how you wanted to do that. But
plus one test could be dependent on the previous result. I mean, like what I'm saying is you could have a test that have one result, and then based on that, you can keep going, right? So you get to a particular state. Because typically in a web application, right, you have to do a few things before you...
But then you do a before each, which is different because then it runs that test, but it uses that before each hook to say, hey, before each hook, I want you to go to this website, log in, for example.
Right, so
I want you to do all that.
Use a promise.
So the test is still... separate. It's just sharing the same before each or fixture or whatever you're using to do
state,
that.
Really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the test itself is not relying on the other test.
Yeah, sure.
That's very important.
That's
Otherwise,
important.
you're writing tests wrong.
Yeah.
But you could do that if you really needed that use case for whatever reason. Then you could actually set your tests up to do
You write a
that,
big
right?
test.
To go in order.
But the
it's kind of
default is parallel.
you're losing the parallelism then.
Yeah. It's in your interest to write the test as small as possible.
Because you want them to be as fast as possible.
Right.
And you want to be able to your tests have passed. And like you said, that you don't have 15 minutes for a coffee break. You only have 3 minutes. And we've seen a
you
lot
can't
of...
even get out of your chair that fast.
Yeah.
You hadn't even finished saying, I am a god.
Yeah.
How about integration with GitLab or Azure DevOps?
Not too sure on all of them. I think there is something with Azure for sure, but I'm not sure on GitLab's.
If only we had a technology we could look it up on. I
So
realize
strange,
Richard is doing that right now.
Yeah, no. There's a whole set of videos on making Playwright work with Azure Pipeline.
Yeah, Azure's easier than for us to integrate with, right?
Yeah. But
Nice.
it seems like it's focused on GitHub Actions.
Well, it's just works out of the box. It's
Right.
easy. So, I mean, it makes sense to add a GitHub Actions are fantastic. I don't know if you ever use them, but it's
I have. But, we've also got commitments into the other thing.
For sure.
It's really hard to make an argument for taking apart the Azure DevOps stack I have working and redoing in GitHub Actions.
No, and if you've got a big corporation and they're already in Azure, you want it to work in Azure, and you can't say, hey, go to GitHub, right? And
I don't know anybody who wants to rebuild their pipeline once it's working.
No.
Right? That's just not a thing. It's
but we do have good integration with Azure, so check that out. And the rest of them I'd have to double check on.
But I think it's certainly one of the DevOpsy aspects of do we have testing integrated into every check-in? It's just part of the workflow.
So, because they put it in Azure Static Web Apps, they have Playwright now as part of the template. Yeah. So when you download the template, you get Playwright.
Yeah, it comes by default. So you can expect
But the Azure team, I think, kind of do a lot of stuff with there. And
it's being used internally.
Of course.
I love it.
I mean, if we don't use the tool, then...
Oh, no, I think that's very significant.
Yeah.
And it also, it's like they know where you live.
Yeah.
Right. When you can always tell when a different Microsoft team is using a product inside of Microsoft because the product accelerates and change. It's always got a big impact.
We've got a lot of use cases as well.
Yeah.
And it's testing, say, Bing, it's testing Excel, we're testing all these different kind of scenarios that we wouldn't normally maybe come across.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of feedback from the teams inside Microsoft as well. But then outside Microsoft, I've had a lot of calls with a lot of companies, open source projects that are using Playwright that I didn't know about, which will feature on the page very soon because I've had some great calls with them. But it's really interesting to see wow, a lot of frameworks. For example, Nuxt are using Playwright to test everything that they build. Quick with Builder.io.
Oh, yeah.
They're using as well to test everything. So there's a lot of good use cases out there. You're like, wow, you're doing all this testing with Playwright. This is good. We just don't hear about it. It's all hidden at the moment.
Well, testing is one of those secret things where you do it well, it really makes your product dramatically better.
Yeah.
So one would almost argue it's a competitive advantage. And I see that over and over again with really clever tech. It's like it's hard to get a case study because people don't want to talk about what a difference it's making.
Yes. Yes. Or the failures that they had. And
there's that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to admit how messed up their testing was,
Yeah.
Or didn't exist.
Well, actually, a very interesting use case is NASA.
Yeah.
So NASA have an open project and they're writing all their Playwright tests and they're looking for contributors of people to help them write more Playwright tests.
For what?
For the MC. So this kind of thing that they're using to put things into space. And I'm so terrible at all this space talk. But yeah, there's one of our ambassadors is actually running that project.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a workshop on it even recently about how to contribute to Playwright on the NASA's, is it MC Connector or MC something?
MC Hammer. Speaking of the 90s.
Open MCT.
Open MCT, there you go. So this one is all using Playwright, and if you want to contribute to NASA's code base, you can literally make a pull request, and then you'll have like, I contributed to NASA. That's insane.
Yeah, you're part of a project. Yes.
Yeah.
So Open MCT is a web-based mission control framework.
Wow.
So that is cool. I'll certainly include a link in the show notes for that one if folks want to take a look at.
Do you get to fly the rocket?
MCT.
That's what
You
Richard
do,
wants
yeah.
to know.
Just remember, like, if the rocket crashes, it was maybe because you didn't write a test. And if the rocket went there, it's because you wrote a great test that passed.
I think we just lost Richard for an hour.
Sorry, what?
I want to fly.
Sorry, what? Well, it's mission control software, so it's you're not flying the rocket directly, but you're part of making sure the rocket flies where it's supposed to go. At least you'd hope, anyway. Always the challenge I find with this testing infrastructure is sustainability, version to version, so forth. Where do people go wrong?
Where do people go wrong?
As software gets older, testing implementations get older.
I mean, where do people go right?
Yeah.
Sorry. No, I think one of if we could change something.
Yeah.
I would change culture. For example, we do not have a testing culture.
I agree.
We do not teach people that this is something that is important.
It's part of a feature's not finished until it has a good set of tests around it.
Exactly. And I think you have the project managers and, the CEOs coming down at you and developers and saying, I need this today. You need to have this finished by the end of the day.
Right.
And the developers are not turning around and saying, no, it'll be finished tomorrow, but it's going to be tested and it's going to be perfect.
Right.
Because they're afraid of losing their jobs or, so they get it done as best they can. They don't actually do it as best they can.
No, obviously they didn't. Yeah.
Because they're afraid to take that step and say, actually, I'm going to write good code and I'm going to be proud of this code and this code is going to be tested and it's going to be great.
This code is going to be tested in production.
Yes.
We're going to test it on our users. Who would do that?
Yeah, we're gonna push on Friday and then I'm going to go home and on Monday we'll figure out the disaster that happened.
Yeah.
And
how we didn't get any work done nothing worked over the weekend, right?
Yes.
Site was down the whole time.
But I think we need to fix this at a much earlier stage. So take it on in the workshops that the people are giving, in the boot camps that people are taking, in the courses that people are teaching. Testing should be like something that you're doing constantly, just like accessibility. You should be writing alt tags automatically. You should never think about later, I must add an alt tag. And I think Twitter is making a great thing by putting the alt tags there. We're getting used to now putting an image up and adding an alt tag.
Yeah.
Takes a couple of extra seconds, minutes maybe, right? If you do them good. And it's like, you just want to tweet something and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to write this alt tag and write this description of this image.
Yeah.
Which is annoying, right? But you're kind of going, this is going to be so much beneficial to other people who cannot visually see that image or who just want to read it for whatever reason. So you're gaining a lot from it.
Yeah. I wonder if there is a policy opportunity in there for check-ins to go, are there tests around this? Should I just run Playwright code gen for you automatically?
That's another way of just like at least getting it started.
Yeah.
But then
the same way that you brought it up, right?
Yeah.
When Twitter basically insists on an alt tag when you bring up an image and even makes a guess at it too, as I recall, right? Like
it's not making a guess at it. No, but it's your choosing. At the moment, you're choosing to click on it and add it.
Yeah.
But if you get in the habit of it, now I'm doing it all the time.
Yeah, you don't even notice. You'll just do it.
It's just part of my habit.
And
right?
it's the same with the accessibility stuff. It's a bear to go back and do it. But if you're doing it as you go, it's not that bad.
Yeah. So I did a thing on ESLint kind of things and making sure that, there was an alt tag there. So I would test that the alt tag was there. And then people like pull requests were sent back. Everything failed because they didn't have an alt tag. So then the people kind of went, I better write alt tags. Otherwise it's never going to pass the PR and it's not going to pass Debbie's standards, right?
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking is that you want, hey, you can't check this in. You don't have any tests.
Yes.
Like go and
this is what we need.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And especially when the tooling literally will help you do it. Like you're not stuck there with a red blank, black, fail bar and nowhere to go. It's like, I'm kicking up the code gen. Let's go to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we just have to create that culture, create that habit.
Yeah.
So that people, like you write your feature and it's finished, right? Let's now quickly just open it up and test it just now.
Yeah.
And now we can push it. And now the test is going to it just makes sense, but we are not in the habit of doing that.
Well, and our tooling isn't making it trivial to do, right? Like a big part of this is, are those tools in play? Are they automatically part of the workflow?
Basically, it's very easy to write bad code and get away with it.
No, we want this pit of success effect. It is really hard to write bad code.
Yeah.
Or you're actually, being pushed and doing the right things.
Testing in particular, because you have to know what you need. You have to know what it should look like, right? What the outcome is.
Yeah, and I think that's where the code gen side would help.
I think end-to-end testing is easier, though. And I think a lot of people took the whole unit, the whole triangle of testing, and unit was like the biggest piece. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been changing now. And end-to-end testing is, in my opinion, a bigger piece of the puzzle. And unit testing is like the smaller, part that you need to test specific functionality of, like adding whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, behavior of an API call, that kind of thing.
There's always a need for unit testing. But end-to-end testing, you can pretty much do almost anything. And now we've got component testing. So in Playwright, you can actually test your component in isolation. So you can test that I don't know, count will count up and down, right? It's just a simple example. But now we know we can put that count on any page. So that could be accounting for the shopping cart. It could be the count for the podcast, how many you're putting in the favorites. That works everywhere you put it because the count works, that component works. And we've tested that component in isolation. So now we know it's going to work.
And Russell mentioned the whole page object idea, right? That so you allow the render to happen, and then you're able to explore the page object and say, are the things I expect happening where I expect it? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of kind of different things, and like page object is one thing, components is another thing,
right?
And it's a completely separate thing. This is more for front end frameworks, so React, Vue, and Svelte. So that kind of taking that component.
So is that testing your page built in Vue, or is that testing Vue the framework?
It's basically testing your component.
Right.
So whatever that component is, it will render it onto an actual empty page with no header, no footer, no nothing.
Okay.
Just that component. You can add in global styles if you think that you need styles.
Yeah, that'll affect things.
Should have everything, but maybe you have theming that comes through somewhere else. So you can add that in so that page will be rendered with that theme, and the component will show you what it visually looks like. And this is great if you're creating a component library, for example, or components that are used across multiple applications. So you want to make sure this component works, right? You test that component.
Yeah.
It's a different test, right? So you will run your tests and you'll run your component tests.
Right.
So two running things, component test using Vite under the hood to build it and to preview it. So you can actually preview that component. And this is nicer than writing a unit test because you can't see anything.
Well, I mean, it is kind of a unit test, but it's a unit test for a
component. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's a visual kind of unit test.
Yeah, it is visual. And you do get the PWA if you want to look at what it was doing.
You still get the whole trace file for that component, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. And it is, inherently kind of an integrated test every time you're looking at a page as a whole. Yeah.
So every time you write that one component, you should write a test for that component.
Sure. But also for each page.
Exactly.
It's just not that hard. The tool leads you to that.
Or test the functionality of, say, the menu. The menu is important. You want the menu to open. The newsletter sign up, right? You want to be able to sign up for that newsletter and it works. There's so many things you can test. And so some people say, I don't know what to test. I'm like, well, as a user, what would you expect? What do you want to do? What do you want to work? And then build your test on that. Test the most difficult thing that...
But it's always the QA mindset. How is the customer going to use this?
Yeah.
And now be that person, work your way through it. And that's what you're testing. The joke, of course, is you get the QA person who knows how to type all the weirdest things into an input box, right?
Yeah.
I want 1 banana. I want -1 bananas. I want 2.13 million bananas. I want horse.
You can go too far sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Evil.
They're pretty nuts.
But given the ability to input evil, users will input it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someone brought that up, right? And it's kind of like, but there's things that like QA engineers are still important. They have a very valid job, but developers need to write and, this code works. Now let's pass it on to the QA engineers to test those kind of other circumstances.
Those extreme elements.
Exactly.
And find a potential exploitable aspect or anything like that. But that's arguably you're wasting their time with these things that could be easily automated and workflow tests so that they can press against the edges.
Exactly. They shouldn't be spending time on simple, trivial things.
And stuff that's ultimately automatable in the pipeline.
Count doesn't work. Come on.
Right.
You don't push that to QA.
That should work. Come on.
But now you're in a pipeline that deploys to QA who then going to do a different other class of testing before they push back to you or it goes on to prod.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very fair.
So what's next for you? What's in your inbox?
What's in my inbox? And you see that I don't obviously open emails.
No.
So I think the biggest thing is creating the community, because we're still a very small community. A lot of people still don't know Playwright exists, which is kind of exciting, because I'm even just speaking down here in the Microsoft booth and people are like, what is Playwright? And I start telling them about it and they're like, I've never heard of this. And it's so cool and exciting because you get to kind of create that excitement. Whereas if everyone's like, yeah, I know what Playwright is, you don't have that same kind of, feedback. So there's a lot of, content creation that we have missing. For example, we don't have enough video content yet. We need to work on that. I'm improving the docs at the moment. The docs are great, but I just want to create things that are missing, improve them a little bit more. There's a lot of work being done. Like the .NET experience is a lot better in the past couple of months. It's incredible.
Yeah.
The Docker integration, better Docker integration is coming as well. That's really cool. I would like to see the code gen go and do those assertions, not just like the click events.
Right.
So that's for me as a kind of would be a killer feature.
Yeah.
But there's so much to do. I'm like, I have a list of like 2 years work of things to do, because we're basically educating the world. We're trying to change their mindset. We're trying to tell them that testing is not difficult and it is easy and fun and it's important. And we should try and dedicate a couple of minutes a day to testing.
Right.
And that's a big challenge.
Sure is.
Yeah. Constant thing. But it looks like a very active group on the GitHub repository. They're answering questions and certainly you see stuff becoming features and identified by version number. That's pretty exciting.
It's community focused, community first. So if people do have issues, features, requests, everything goes through GitHub. And yeah, we do go through those issues and we do kind of decide, okay, let's work on this and try and make Playwright as good as possible.
Awesome.
That's great, Debbie. Thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much for being here.
Hope we can talk again soon.
Yes.
And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks.
.NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy. Life is hard.